so often we say, oh, my work is terrible and I'm not getting what I want and I'm not getting the promotion I want. I'm not getting the client opportunities. And so then we sort of extrapolate that and say, oh, my life is terrible. But if we rather say work is in this box, in this, all around here, we still have so much that can bring us fulfillment, and we focus on those things and we do it intentionally, I think we will automatically start feeling more satisfied with our lives and the way we're living.
So before we get into today's episode, should you be a business owner juggling multiple roles and hungry to grow your dream business, but you're lacking the time and support? Trust me, we've all been there. Then this is a little reminder to head on over to thestream.co.za for your free resources and to find out more about our exclusive membership that launches once a year. Let's get back into this episode. Today, I chat to Donna, who left her full-time career working in corporate for over 15 years to start her own coaching business and, in her words, help women unlock their potential by creating lives they love. We chat about advice on creating more purpose and fulfillment within your career and your personal life, whilst we also touch on the darker side of entrepreneurship that is so often glamorized. To add to the juicy topics, we talk about Donna's personal experience with burnout and how it forced her to take charge and leave corporates. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Donna. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to get into the conversation about changing career, whether entrepreneurship is for everyone, because I think there's this definitely a glamorized version on social media, and people feeling, especially post 2020, that, the only way to go is, if you're unhappy in your career, is to start your own business. So we can touch on that. And I think also chatting just in general about those people who may not feel fulfilled within their current positions. But to kick off, I know, of course, a bit of your background and how impressive your resume is. But if you can share that with our listeners and sort of give a background as to, your career up until now and how you took the leap yourself in starting your own business.
Sure. It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And it's great to catch up again after, we worked a bit together last year, but after quite a long period. So I'm Donna. I am a wife and mom of 3 smallish, I would say, children, 9, 7, and 2. I hate it when people introduce themselves saying that they're a wife and a mom, because there's so much more to who everyone is than that. But I feel like in this season, it is something that sort of defines who I am and what my priorities are. And I think that's sort of been my journey as well. I have a finance background, so I've worked in corporate finance for the past sort of 10 to 12 years. But always through my career, I've had this involvement in learning and development, coaching, mentorship, and it's always been a passion of mine. I come from a family of teachers, and so I think it's sort of in my blood. And every career shift I had, I found myself being pulled into training and development of people in some way. And it really is such a passion of mine. And then last year, through one of these life transitions that we tend to go through every now and again, my family and I decided it was time for me to just have some more flexibility. And so I left like the corporate structure, and also just wanted to be able to have the time and energy to be able to grow my business on the side, which is focused specifically around something that's been on my heart for a while, but I've never really felt like it was the right time, And last year it felt like the right time. And so while I'm still consulting for corporate finance, I have the privilege of being able to build my own leadership development and coaching business as well.
That's awesome. And I'm very inquisitive to know what that felt like. What does it feel like for you that when you say that it was the right time to make that shift? Obviously, I know there's a sequence of events and to get you to that point. But what did it feel like when you personally knew that it was time for a change?
Yeah. So it's amazing how things in retrospect, you're able to say, oh, that happened and this happened for a reason. But when you're in like seasons that are hard or challenging, it doesn't always feel as though everything's happening for a reason, you know? And also what I really believe is that these like thoughts and nagging things that linger in the back of our minds of, oh, I wish one day I could do that, or I really feel like I one day want to be able to do something. It's not there by accident, I don't believe. I think it's there for a reason, and it's this sort of underlying passion and purpose that will come at the right time. And last year, I actually went through a period of burnout, and I was booked off work for quite a long period of time. And it was during this time when I was forced to re-evaluate my priorities. And I realized that my life was totally out of alignment, where how I really would have loved my life to be was so totally far from what my reality was. And it was because my priorities were just totally out of sync. And I think this happens to us a lot. We go through these life stages and life transitions and changes in careers and moving towns, and we don't actually stop and reevaluate, you know, what is important to us right now in this period of our lives. And I really feel like this creates this misalignment, and that brings quite a deep-seated discontentment.
Yeah.
And it's not, I'm not saying it's always related to the work that we do, but it could actually be things outside of work that sort of build up to this place where you're forced to rethink how your life is. And I'm also at the stage of life where I'm thinking, well, you know, I'm sort of like, it's my half time now. You know, what is the next half of my life going to be like? And is it really going to be purposeful and impactful? And I think that sort of got me to the point to rethink and say, well, you know, I'd love to be able to invest more of my energy in development of other people, and specifically in women. And I feel like women have this expectation that we place on ourselves to be everything to everyone. And there's so much that we can learn from each other.
Yeah.
And I felt like my story and what I went through last year was really sort of a trigger for me to be able to create something that is really authentic because I've lived through it myself.
Yeah.
And so that sort of got me to the point to say, okay, it's time to pursue this. Took quite a few conversations with my husband because, like you say, you know, you've got this structure in your lives and the security, you know, your norm that you've created for you and your family, and all of that changes. And so maybe we'll chat about it a little bit later as well around, you know, where to start and understanding your purpose and things. But I really feel like you've got to be very clear about why you make the decision to make a change, because you can't be running away from something. When you change your career or when you add something to your life, you can't do it because you're discontent or unhappy in a certain place. It's got to come from more of a why rather than a push from something else. And I feel that's where I was. And it's a privilege. I think not everyone is able to leave a stable corporate environment to pursue something that's a passion. And I feel every day I'm very grateful to have had that opportunity. But it comes with a lot of change and a lot of hard work, which you only realize when you're in it, right?
Totally. And I also agree with you. I've heard coaches particularly say that it's not a privilege. Like, we are all able to, you know, quit sort of a corporate steady job and have this fulfilling career. But I do agree with you. I think it's so much easier said than done, and we'll definitely get into the detail of it. But also, so you went through personally a burnout. Some others might not have gotten to that point, but have this, you know, this little voice in your head that just gets louder and louder and louder. Yeah, I'm inquisitive to know also from your burnout, like how long it was and how you recovered from that. Like these sorts of things when it comes to mental health, I find so fascinating because we all go through it.
Yeah, so I would say I'm still on a journey because the things that got me into the situation where I was like physically ill for weeks, where I literally had to rest, which in my world like did not exist. Average was not an option, let alone like below average, where you have this expectation of you create, and I said it before, I think we create these expectations of ourselves in our heads of what we think other people expect of us. And it wasn't only in my work context, it was at home, it was with friends, it was with family, and so those habits and systems and the way we do things, our norm, our default, it takes a long time to break those and to change those. And that's not going to happen, in a 4-week period of time when you're booked off from work. It's gonna take a lot. And so I'd say I'm still navigating that. And the thing with burnout as well is that it actually leads to burnout itself is not a mental health condition, but it can develop into depression, anxiety, and so I've experienced all of those along with the burnout, and so all of that sort of, I don't want to say it's baggage, but it's the stuff that you carry with you, and you have to work through it in a very authentic way in a time that you're ready to do it. Because you can't also make changes in your life for other people. It's got to be from you.
Totally. It sounds like if you didn't experience burnout and all of those sort of side effects that came with it, you would have still been in your corporate career, because you sound like such a high achiever, high performer, that if it wasn't something that literally put you in bed, you wouldn't have made a change.
Yeah. And I look back and I think, sure, it really, and that's why I do believe the timing was quite miraculous in a way, where it all aligned at the right time. But for some people, like you say, it's not always an event like that. It could be something else. But I honestly do think it is a privilege, because a lot of people don't even know what their passion is. A lot of people don't even realize what their purpose in life is. And they're just on this treadmill because it's comfortable and it's familiar. And, that's why I consider it a privilege to know what I'm passionate about, and be able to invest my energy and my time in building something that can help other people, in a way that they can also sort of thrive. Because I think there is a life out there for each of us, in that we thrive and that we don't just plod along. But it's figuring out for each of us in our unique season of life what that is. And I don't think we take the time to properly do that.
As you were talking and like you say, people that don't know their passions, I'm thinking of someone in particular, and you can relate to this, having been in finance pretty much your whole career, is we had a girls' weekend away, and one of the girls had this heart to heart, just saying that the other day she was just questioning who is she other than an accountant? And she was chatting to a coach, and they were like, but what are your passions? And she's like, well, I can't make my passion of walking with my kids or being in nature my job. And they're just so confused as to, it's especially at the age that we're at, if you've been in your career for 10 to 20 years, where do you even start with knowing what to do next?
Exactly. And often it doesn't have to be a career change. It doesn't have to be drastic. I think it's got to be just a little bit more, investing in things that really, as cliche as it sounds, but lights a spark in you, because that actually filters into everything. And I also think it could work the other way around. Our work environments, we spend so much of our time at work. I read somewhere the other day, it's 90,000 hours in our lifetime or something like that. It's something outrageous. And when our work environment is not making us content, it actually bleeds into our whole lives. And I was in a place where I was letting the expectations of my role and the people around me many of those expectations were self-created expectations, I must add. It was filtering into how I was being a parent and how I was being a wife. And yet, if someone had to say to me, what are your priorities and what do you value most? I would always say my husband and my children first. But the way I was living was not that way. I would, even in conversation, I would say, I work in corporate finance and I'm a wife and a mom. Or like I'd catch myself explaining to people, and it's what you say, like your career, I think for many of us, our career defines who we are, because it's what's secure to us.
Yes, totally. So on that note, how do you help your clients, especially with that sort of finding their why and transitioning their lives to align with, I think you mentioned like seasonal purpose, how you help them? I'd like to know more about that.
So I think we have to take a holistic view of our lives, because every piece of the puzzle fits in a certain way in a different season. And I'm not saying that every picture of our lives is going to be the same in every season. I think it changes. And so I think it's really important that when we go through these life transitions, that we do actually just stop and say, what do I really value right now? Like 5 things, not 10, not 20, but like the most important 5 things right now in my life. And many people don't even know what their values are. Many people don't even know what their priorities are. And then what we start doing is we actually start working and living according to what other people tell us is important. And so that's where I start with my clients. We start with looking at a holistic view of their life and say, okay, what are your priorities right now? And where are you investing your time? Because very often these are your priorities, but your time is being invested here. And so that creates this misalignment. And I think that's why people think that they need coaching in the first place, is because they think, well, I need to be able to get back to a life where I'm writing the next chapter, and so we start there and we start looking at all the areas of life and we say, where are we now? Where do we want to be? And what does that where do I want to be look like? And then how do we put into place sustainable, consistent mechanisms to get us from here to there? And it's not going to take a week. It's not going to take a month. And it's also not extreme. Yeah. I do not believe in extremes because it's not sustainable. And it actually just puts more pressure on us than something that is small, easy, actually not easy. Sometimes simple, but not easy. Steps that can take us from this is where my life is now to that is where I want it to be. And very often that's not just 1 or 2 goals, but rather like a big picture vision for your life. So when I work with my clients, I prefer to start with a vision, like something big, something bold, and that's not confined to what my life is now, because often what my life is now has so many limitations on it that I've put there because I'm fearful of a challenge. I'm creating these scenarios in my head of what could go wrong, and so we tend to hold ourselves back. But if we start with looking at that big picture and what it looks like and how we would like our lives to be, it then becomes clearer of what we're working towards. And through that exercise, this picture emerges of what is my purpose, like what is important to me right now, and where am I going to place my time and my energy.
Yeah, there's so much that you touched on, and all I can think in the back of my head is like, if not now, when? And I know it's not always the perfect time for anyone listening to go, okay, I've been unhappy, let's make a career change. But like you said, like time just goes by so quickly, and then you almost feel like it's becoming even harder, especially, of course, with your responsibilities and, steady income and running a household. But I also feel, and this is something we can chat about, is like you also said, it doesn't mean that you have to change your career. It's just, sort of shifting things where you're currently at. Because if I think back to my career in PR, there was a very long period that I was so unhappy, especially London days, that cutthroat, very like corporate structure. And it was, as much as it was overwhelming and sort of consumed my life, there was also this addiction to it, because you were getting this recognition from like your senior managers, and you were getting, the corporate structures are very clever. I see it with my husband as well, although he's very happy. It's very, I'm going to generalize, I feel for men it's often a lot easier. I'm way too emotional about a lot of things. So what I mean with that time period is, if I were to quit immediately because of the times that I was crying and the this and the that, I wouldn't have been or have the knowledge that I have now, and have come such a long way, where now I look back at my London experience and I miss the times that were actually quite like the getting on the tube, and it was so many people, and getting to work, and like when it was winter it was constantly dark, like all those miserable periods. I actually miss it, and there was so much that I learned from it. So I think we can also touch on, it's not necessarily that you have to quit, and because there's a dark side to entrepreneurship as well.
No, exactly. There's pros and cons to everything in life, I think. And that's why I say you can't also make decisions coming out of a place that when you're unhappy. It's a piece of advice that someone gave me, and it's so wise, because often we feel that we may need to make big life changes in a season when we're feeling discontent with how things are. And it shouldn't be that way. I think we should make big life changes in a season when things are going well, because it means we're not then running away from something. But I think in my case, it was something that has been on my mind for a very, very long time. And it just aligned in a way that it was the right time. And for me, it's a shift away. I'd like to. Maybe it's not a complete change in career. It's just a change in the structure that I'm familiar with. Because I'm still doing consulting, corporate finance consulting work, but I have the flexibility now to be able to invest in growing something I want to say on the side, but it's not really on the side, because the intention is that it becomes something that is a business, And so one of the workshops that I've created is called Time Tools Workshop. And when you were talking about time flies, I think there's so much more to time management or managing our time than just scheduling and time management. It's going back to what we've been talking about, being clear on what is our purpose and what are our priorities, and making sure that when we say yes, we're saying yes to the right things. Because when every time we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else, actually. And, if we say yes to another commitment at work, we're saying no to time with our family. If we say yes to another dinner with acquaintances, not even close friends, we're saying no to time at home with your husband, or whatever it is, developing yourself, or whatever it is. Whatever we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else. And I think we live in a culture where there's this like expectation that we say yes to fill our days and our calendars, and that also comes to a place where we start overcommitting our children, even to sports events or parties, or so for me it's been a real like quite a big change. Like my kids sometimes don't even know they're being invited to all the parties that they're invited to, because I have a filter process to say no, we're not going to that one, but we'll go to this one, because otherwise it just gets too much, and our lives really do go past so fast. We've got to also build in time to just breathe. have this like margin where we can lean in when we need to, and try and like reduce this guilt of having to be everything to everyone. And I think that's also what I really try to help my clients with, to know that when they're saying yes, like it means yes. And when they're saying no, it's because it doesn't align to what their priorities are right now, and not feeling guilty about that.
Yeah. It's so hard when you're a people pleaser, but as I get older as well, and I've just seen, I ended up doing exactly that a lot, is especially when living in the city, and there were so many social occasions. I've got a lot of different friendship groups there, and so you do commit in advance, and then the day comes and you're almost wanting to back out, and then you feel even more guilty. And it's and I think that's the beauty of having a coach or having someone guide you along that process, that you're constantly going to get there. Like you're constantly going to question and have to reorganize or find your purpose and simplify your goals, because I found myself doing it this morning as well. It's just when things are, manageable and I'm able to balance work and life, I'm suddenly programmed for the chaos to commit more, because I'm like, this is too quiet. And then it's so bad.
Exactly. And it's the culture we live in as well. It's like this, I think there's this also a sense of sort of this instant gratification culture, where everything just, there's more and it's accessible at the touch of a button. And, there's just there's no space. And so I've had to become quite intentional about just creating space. And it's really, really hard. It's really hard because also, and I suppose it links to also building a business at the same time, is that you've actually got to create space to be able to think about, to think, to create, to be clear on where you're moving towards, rather than, you've got to be able to be proactive rather than reactive when you're building a business. You've got to think and be able to sometimes take things much slower than what you ordinarily would, because you're growing and learning, and you have to be open to going a little bit slower sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I've become a lot more aware of what's energy draining and what's actually giving me energy. And it keeps going back to the same things, so that I've had to restructure things in my household, including when I go onto social media, when I'm on tech, when I'm not, because the mindless scrolling or things that come up on social media, either it impacts me socially and I'm looking at everyone, traveling abroad and having this amazing life, or it's me from a work perspective, and I'm going, oh gosh, I haven't got into that. That's exactly what I want to do, and that's where I want to get to. And so your monkey mind just makes you so damn tired. And then a lot of the times, like I've seen with clients, they just never end up making any changes or implementing anything, because it's just been so overwhelming, and majority of it's been in their head.
Exactly. It's these stories we create for ourselves. And the thing you say about energy as well has been a very big change for me building a business, is that, when you're in a structured corporate environment, yes, there are ways to be able to manage your energy and your high focus times, but I've had to create that structure now with more flexibility, which is wonderful for me as a mom of 3 young kids. Just being there for my kids when I need to has been totally invaluable. But I've also I'm a very structured person, and so I've had to create that structure so that I know when my high focus, high energy times are in the day, I'm investing that in doing high focus work. And that I'm not leaving my own business to 4 o'clock in the afternoon when I have zero energy, and then it's just another day and I think, oh, I didn't get to that, or I didn't want to do that. And so, I think that's also been quite an adjustment, is moving from that corporate structure, and what's been familiar to me for, almost 15 years to creating my own structure, and learning a lot along the way, and doing things wrong sometimes. I'm not someone who likes making mistakes, and I'm not someone who likes to try new things. But sure, when you're growing your own business, you sort of have to figure it all out as you go.
100%. And I think also, okay, we'll touch on the starting your own business side of things. And I know there's a whole lot that we can get into there. But I think for anyone that's listening who's kind of in a situation where they can't make a change right now, any tips on how they can find more fulfillment in their jobs? Like if I just have to think about the conversations that I've heard a lot, it's a lot of the times where sort of friends have been, upset with work environments or wanting change has been because it's been other colleagues. So I don't know, is it something that, you can't always avoid that, but there's sometimes practical tools and things that you can do for the influences surrounding you. Can touch on that. And I think the other thing is what you also mentioned, which is very clear, is it all starts with yourself. We can go into depth with that as well. It all, everything that you've spoken about, there's so much that you've discovered about yourself and how you work optimally. So yeah, it definitely starts with that. But any tips in that department?
Sure. So one of the things that I am very clear on is that there's this myth around work-life balance. And I don't believe work-life balance exists. I don't think it ever can, because when you're talking about balance, you're talking about equal parts of something. And for many of us, our work is a much larger part. If we look at a 24-hour period, our work takes up a much larger part than non-work. But maybe if we just flip it on its head and say, yes, my work is not in the ideal space where I'd like it to be right now, but there are other things in your life that bring you contentment or should bring you contentment. And very often we're not seeing those things because we're placing so much emphasis on getting satisfaction from the work we do. But if we flip it on our heads and say, in my life, I also have friends, I also have personal development, I also have family, I also have these passions or these hobbies that I really enjoy. How do I emphasize my time on those things so that when I come to work, which is not amazing, but it's secure and I'm privileged to have a job, then that part of your life is going to start feeling a little bit better because you're investing also in the other elements of your life. And I think so often we say, oh, my work is terrible and I'm not getting what I want and I'm not getting the promotion I want, I'm not getting the client opportunities. And so then we sort of extrapolate that and say, oh, my life is terrible. But if we rather say work is in this box, in this, all around here, we still have so much that can bring us fulfillment, and we focus on those things and we do it intentionally, I think we will automatically start feeling more satisfied with our lives and the way we're living, that it will then feed back to our work environment. Because we bring ourselves to work whether we like it or not. And the other way around, our work comes with us. And so it's got to be this harmony. It can't be this part of my life has to be equal to this part, because it's very, very rare that you actually get that. So if you know that spending 10 minutes with your husband and a glass of wine in the evenings is going to fill your cup, then you need to make sure that you do that more frequently than getting home late from work. And it just takes a couple of times a week. Like I said, it doesn't have to be extreme. It's not to say every day I have to sit and have a glass of wine with my husband, because that's also just putting more pressure on the situation. If you rather just say 3 times a week or twice a week, we're going to make an effort to connect. It's amazing how much that can fill someone's cup if you're intentional about it and if you really notice it. So yeah, I would challenge someone to flip the work thing on its head and rather say, what else is happening in my life that I can be grateful for and invest my energy and my time in?
Yeah, that's very, very valuable. And I couldn't agree more with the whole life versus work balance. That's non-existent. I think it's both within corporate and most definitely when you're an entrepreneur. I mean, I've spoken to so many entrepreneurs that say, they left corporate for the freedom and the flexibility, but then when you start your own business, it takes over. And also, not only the take time off, like I've found, especially in the first 3 years of Stream, and even with my PR agency back 10 years ago, is you're so passionate that you don't want to switch off, especially if you're like us, like quite A-type, like to have control, like very driven. You want that business to succeed as well as your career progressed when you work with someone, and it's not always the way it goes. But maybe we should just touch on that as well for anyone that is wanting to start their own business. I think like I've got friends who are incredibly talented and really successful within corporate environments, and then have tried working for themselves and almost like just not sort of didn't kick it off successfully because of various reasons. But I think that's also something, like I said earlier, that gets glamorized, especially since sort of 2020 and people working more remote, and you're seeing people are like living this idealistic lifestyle of, holidays with their laptop on an island, whereas that's not always the reality. And even when you're on holiday, when you run your own business, there's a lot at the beginning going through your mind when it comes to like the revenue that's fluctuating month to month. Going to happen in 3 to 6 months, like all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's, starting your own business, you've got to be so clear of what your why is. Why have I made this change? Why am I, and even to the point where you could even write it down and put it somewhere so that when you wake up and you think, oh, do I have to do this again? Or, because there are days like that, you can be so completely passionate about something. But there will be days where you think, have I made a mistake? Have I done the wrong thing? Is this the right time? You're going to doubt yourself a lot. And when you're clear on your why, it just makes it that much easier to stick to that vision. And that's another thing, is to have the end goal in mind. It's not going to be tomorrow that you're going to have the end goal, like that old story of a flower blooms from a tiny seed, but you've got to plant the seed first under the ground for it to actually grow to something. So you can't also expect things to happen overnight. And I think often it's that instant gratification thing again. We expect our business to be what we dream about it being, but it's hardly had time to even get off the ground, And then I think you also have to be clear on what your experience and skill set is. It's I think by chance, if someone is able to grow a successful business without the skills and the experience to be able to do it, then it's by fluke, because often you've got to invest your experience, your skill set, and bring that along with your own authentic experiences of life.
Yeah.
To build something that is going to be of value to someone else. In my case, that's what it was. And that's why I think the timing of it was such that I had my own story to tell so that I can help people through what they're going through. And you've got to then also be open to learning and growing and making mistakes. And being able to change something if you think this is going to definitely work and it doesn't. You've got to be open-minded as well to say, what can change. And something else that I think is absolutely invaluable is having a mentor, someone who has done it before, someone who is older and wiser, not older in age necessarily, but just someone who has taken the steps before you. And, it's not to say that you're stealing that person's ideas or you're trying to take their client network, but it's that they have the experience that they can share with you and to encourage you, because very often they've got to their point by making a million mistakes that you could avoid if you just openly chat to them about what they've been through. So I found that extremely helpful as well. And then you also need to be realistic and say, can this make, if my objective is to make money out of my business, which probably 99% it would be the expectation, you've got to say, well, how am I going to monetize this? Mm-hmm. And how do you do that? And in this industry, what are the ways that I can do that? What tools am I going to use? What network channels can I use? And each of us have a network that we bring with us from whatever place we're in. It could be old work colleagues. It could be, networks through schools, if your kids are at schools. But you do need to be very clear on what your why is. Because I'm sure you've also experienced that, where there are days and you're like, what am I doing the right thing? It's so much easier to say, I'll just forget about this passion of mine. I'll let it linger and I'll go back to a corporate structure that's familiar and secure.
Totally. And I think that's exactly, I think something that one doesn't realize when you start your own business necessarily, especially when you think that you're moving within the same field as you've had experience in. Like, I got to that point where I had 15 years experience within PR and marketing. So you're assuming when you start this new career that touches within that sort of space that I am going to, suddenly become very successful because I've got that 15 years of experience. But then you forget with entrepreneurship that you're not only doing that role that you used to do or something similar, you're also taking on the IT role, the HR role, all these things that you don't have the skill set for. And you often don't think of it. It's like, I've had a friend who's recently started on her own and gone like, gosh, I now realize the benefits of being in corporate with all the different departments and how they all fit together. And now you're on your own. And I think a mentor is a massive help, but also support groups. So anyone else, I've got an amazing group of friends who all in their mid to late 30s who've run their own businesses since their 20s. So when we get together and we bitch and we moan, I realize, okay, you're
not alone.
Yeah. So
exactly.
You choose your scenario over theirs, and it's just nice to have that sort of support.
No, and I think that we try to do everything at one time. Like when you're doing it yourself, it can very quickly become like this hamster wheel of just every day, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, you've got to touch on all these parts. But something that I found very, very helpful is also this idea of batching. I don't know if you know about it, but like structure, and it's also come from my need for structure, is to say, okay, today I'm going to do my finances, tomorrow morning is my this, and you batch these business tasks that in a corporate environment might have been someone else's role. But when you're everything in your business, social media takes up a lot of time. Then, structuring a morning once a week to plan it out. And just having that plan makes me, a structured person, feel more in control of what's happening.
Yes. And I think maybe we're nearing to the end of our chat. And I think almost what will be quite nice for you to touch on as well is talking about batching and sort of structures that you put in place. Any healthy habits, whether it's like morning or evening routines, or maybe you don't sort of follow that, or general habits that you form to perform better both in work and as an entrepreneur and as a mother and a wife?
No, I'm the biggest fan of morning and evening routines.
Me too.
I even include that in my time tools workshop because I think there's just so much good that can come from a morning routine that's structured and an evening routine that's structured. And I'd say the one big thing that I incorporate in both my morning and evening routines, and I'm trying to be more intentional about creating it through the day as well, is just, and it sounds so silly, but it is so powerful, is just noticing things that I can be grateful for. Because when I'm on my own, or when things go wrong, it's so easy to dwell on what's not working.
Yeah.
And that can happen a lot when you're building a business. and when you're building a family, or when you're going through a big change, or whatever we're going through, there are always things that don't always go according to plan. And I think just being more mindful of the things I'm grateful for also just makes me realize that what does go wrong is not always the end of the world, because we tend to take those one or two things that went wrong and we say, oh, it's been such a bad week, or it's been such a horrible month. But actually those were such small things compared to all the good that we've got. So as a new business or business startup entrepreneur, it's so important to focus on the things that you're grateful for. And for me, that's been like flexibility, being able to invest in my passion, work with people who I can see are benefiting from, what I've shared or what they've learned. And that really is, or messages, I'm sure for the same for you, like messages you get on social media to say thank you for your love and motivation. And I don't even know these people, and yet they're connecting in some way. All of those are things to be grateful for, because not everything is always going to go right, but a lot goes right a lot of the time as well.
So true. I even found myself changing the things that I need to be proud of as my sort of role changes with seasons. So the other day I literally was like, I actually should celebrate the time. This is going to sound so lame, but I know a lot of people can relate to like working from home and having time to sit outside with my dog and play and be there and mindful and not on my phone or annoyed with him because he's hyper and I haven't taken him out, and being proud of myself for hanging up the washing, doing the dishes all before sitting behind my computer, like things that would frustrate me, going, most of the tasks being ticked off, like I'm progressing and I mustn't focus on the fact that I've been sitting on a health insurance sales call for 3 days in a row and not gotten a quote yet. Like
Exactly. And I think it also, when we operate from a place of gratitude, when things don't go wrong, we're able to see them more easily as learning opportunities rather than something that is wrong or was a mistake. We're able to then grow from that experience rather than break ourselves down. And I think as entrepreneurs, or in any walk of life, actually, that is something that all of us can benefit from more of.
Hundreds, and there's so much that especially like women take on from a role perspective. I know that whether, I think that's a conversation for another day, like talking about working moms and their roles and the guilt surrounded about like not giving enough at home and in the workspace. But we really do, from the gratitude perspective, there's just so much that we don't stop to acknowledge what we are doing right during the day, because there's so much that's being done.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's lots of healthy habits that I try to instill for my family and I, but that's just been one that I've really been trying to be more intentional about, because, there's also just so much going on in our lives around us that is so much out of our control, in our country and the world. And, when we zone in on what is going right and the good around us, I think we're able to have more content in our lives and satisfaction, I think, from people we engage with, to clients, to family.
No, very, very true. I'm inquisitive to know what resources you tap into to sort of support your personal growth and career development. So if there's any podcasts or books or courses, or like you mentioned, mentors that you sort of tap into to further your growth.
Yeah. So I love listening to podcasts. I listen to quite a few different business podcasts. I think you and I, there's the one, Diary of a CEO. I found that quite some nice podcasts there. The health and well-being podcast, I listen to Deliciously Ella, quite a few of hers, because that's also just broader than just physical health as well. And then I'm a big fan of Brené Brown, John Maxwell, and those are sort of like business leaders who I follow their work, and I really have learned a lot from them, and their books as well. I've started trying to read more. When we're talking about evening routines, that's part of my evening routine, and I try to alternate between a learning book and a book for pleasure. I think it gets sometimes a bit heavy when you're always on learning books. But I'm actually reading a book at the moment called The Quiet Leader. And that's also just interesting ways to lead people and lead yourself differently. So I enjoy books about leadership, and I think we can learn things from whatever we engage with. So there's always a snippet of something, whether it's engaging with people, and it's just us being open to that and being teachable. I think we also need to, if learning and development, personal learning and development is a priority for us, we need to bring that in, whether it's reading a book or listening to a podcast. I think we need that so that we also feel like we're touching on things that are important to us in our lives.
Okay.
But I'd say that the mentor is the biggest advantage is having someone to just unpack stuff with.
Yeah. And do you see someone regularly, like monthly?
No, not monthly. It's quite an informal kind of arrangement. It's someone I worked with for a very long time, and I see her as a mentor. She's grown a business in the learning and development space outside of corporate. And so, it's regularly, we actually get together more for like lunches and coffees rather than like a formal mentor kind of chat. But I think the thing with the mentor is that we've got to value that person's time as well. And so there's always sort of a list of questions I have ready to throw at her. And just so that the time is invested well. But I'd say every second month we chat.
Amazing. That's this type of mentor. I think in an informal setting, it's even better. Getting out of your environment, seeing someone in a lunch sort of setting, and getting to just, because often when you have those sorts of long form chats, more comes up than what you didn't even think you needed advice on.
Exactly.
Just on the book front as well, I'm exactly the same. I'm having to find more books now for pleasure, because so many of the books that I sort of invest in and buy are all like sort of self-help or leadership or some sort of
exactly
next to my bed. They're either that or they're incredibly spiritual and deep. And when I'm tired, I literally am reading the page 6 times and not getting anywhere. We have to diversify with the books that I've got.
Exactly. And then also, I think the other thing that we maybe take for granted, because many of us, it's like a trap, but social media, you can actually get so much valuable help from, if you use it in the correct way. I know it's designed to take us down a rabbit warren, but I have learned a huge amount from people, like yourself on social media, just, around business tools and tips and, it's like nuggets of wisdom.
Yeah. Do you know what I've actually done on that recently with social media? Because I've got my personal and my business account. Even on my business account, I get a lot of value because of the types of people that I follow. And if there's anyone on there, like friends who, like, no offense, like I don't want to see their content during, when I'm going on there with a purpose to learn, I'll mute that so that I just keep structuring what comes up in my feed. But even with that, I get distracted because I'm following so many different sort of accounts. So what I've also done is opened up a private account, following 10 people at a time through the season that I'm going through. And when I log in, I'm just on that account. So I can't veer off to too many different sort of pages. And I'm just seeing the same sort of knowledge that I'm really wanting to sort of absorb on that page. It's been quite a nice little exercise to do.
Yeah, I'm sure, because I think there really is so much value that we can learn. I mean, people put out things that are so helpful, but often we miss them because we're in this sort of scrolling zone, you know. So yeah, by limiting it, that must be. You've got to be very intentional about it.
100%. Yeah, go on with a purpose and know when, and be strict with your bound. I've got a timer on mine actually. So I have to actually, when it says like basically you reach the cap, I have to put on there that I want to stay on for longer or reject it. Like the Netflix little pop up when it comes up and it tells you like, do you want to continue watching? It's like, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Are you sure you want to continue?
So funny how much, like, if you look at the books that I have in the podcast I've been listening to and everything, like how like in depth it is for like self-growth and spirituality. And then on the weekend, husband's away for work and I'm sitting binge watching Selling Sunsets reality TV. Balance it out.
Of course.
Thanks so much, Donna, for your time today, and thanks for all your wisdom and everything you share. I know for anyone listening, if they're interested in more working with you, they can head on over to your page. So I'll drop in all of those links that are relevant. But yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Hey guys, it's me again. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please can you subscribe so that you are notified as soon as new episodes drop, and share the Stream podcast with your friends and family and co-workers who are just as inquisitive as you are about learning and improving their quality of life. And then lastly, if you want more mental health and business resources, inspo, and podcast recommendations, just a reminder to subscribe to my monthly Stream newsletter. No spam, just pure positive value delivered straight to your inbox.